Haidong! In this video, we're going to discuss the Federation High Guard. So you may have noticed that the guard that I was using in the past couple of videos may have looked a little bit different from what your master instructor has been showing you. So I guess just to show you potentially two different versions. So for example, this is going to be the version that I've been doing versus the version that you were probably taught as a Gumdosa. So this is the, I'm going to call it either the standard or the sparring high guard, right? So if you're here, right? So notice again the angle here. Notice that this has about a 135 degree or 3 pi over 4 angle, right? So this is actually a very strong angle here. And my right hand is again in a pretty comfortable position up here. I actually switch it a little bit this way, so you might notice I have a little bit of a gap here. That's mostly using my hand as a trigger finger for when I do one-handed strikes that we did in the last video, right? So this, and also notice my stance is not usually that deep, right? This again is kind of like our half potato say. This is something that's very common in Bangkok. So this is our standard high guard. And this is something that we're going to assume is a little more federation. So notice that my sword is a lot more upright. My hand is almost like following the curvature this way. Notice that there is almost that's actually greater than the 180 here. And also my hand is also pretty high up. So this is the Federation High Guard. Usually you associate this with a longer guard or a longer stance. But this is the Federation High Guard. So that's very different from the high guard I was using in my sparring combination. So what's going on, right? First, make sure you always follow what your master instructor is telling you, right? Just because some random person on YouTube is telling you that you can use this guard in a different way, make sure you follow what your master instructor tells you. I'm just going to be showing you some context for why the Federation does do it that way. Now, before going too far, I want you to try those combinations that we did in the last video, coming from the Federation High Guard. So again, this is how we were usually doing it, and now we're kind of more upright here. So again, try those three combinations, and again, see what you feel. Not great, right? So for example, when we're in this guard, my left hand has no power. Right? So I really like the standard one just because you're already in a cutting position. This isn't a cutting position, right? So even if I hold it more upright, you can think of it almost like a guillotine, maybe. Right? So if you're here, you kind of step with it. Right? You're more or less just letting gravity do it. You're not really assisting it in any way. So the left hand is bent, right? So it's not that powerful. My right hand is extended, so I can't even just like cock it back for a proper cut. So at least from an offensive perspective, the Federation High Guard doesn't work as well. So that said, a guard would not exist if it had zero benefit, right? So if the offense isn't better, so probably this must be doing, again, one of the other attributes better, or it's kind of fixing one of our problems. So let's kind of go back through those and see which one it might be better at. So let's first talk about those weaknesses, right? So does this fix our lower body problem? No, right? And in fact, this kind of makes it worse because I can't even defend a normal center cut as well. I would have to step back and dip, right? As opposed to from here, I could switch into a more powerful block if I need to. So this doesn't doesn't fix it, right? So again, you can probably hit my knee. Does it fix the fact that this is a blind spot? Still there. Does the Federation High Guard do something better than our standard? Well, it's not better offensively, it's not better defensively. So what were the other uses for our High Guard? Well, one of them was changing position, but that seems to be about the same, right? So we're bun, bun, I can turn. It's about the same. So it's not, at the very least, it's not worse than our standard. But what was our third and final one? That was our surveying situation, right? Here. Okay, so far, this seems about the same, right? I can kind of turn. So it might be a little bit easier just because there's less weight, right? But it seems about the same. So let's make one assumption, and then from there we can kind of see why the Federation is teaching it this way as opposed to a standard high guard. So remember, one of my running theories is that the Sangsu forms were developed for the Sangsu gun. So again, that's the body length sword, really heavy, really long. Now, if I wanted to survey or even like hold it up in high guard from a standard, I'm gonna get tired really, really quickly because I'm holding up the blade this way. I'm kind of using it as a fulcrum. My right hand is gonna be, it's gonna wear out. My left hand, actually it's probably gonna be fine. But I'm gonna get really tired holding this. If I survey, I might smack someone, right, that I don't necessarily want to smack. So if we're using a really long and really heavy weapon, the standard one is actually going to be very tiresome. Additionally, if we switch to this position, so first of all, the weight is going to be a lot more equidistant, right? So it's going to be a lot less strain, right, on your body. So if I'm holding up a heavy blade, so first of all, again, I'm not whacking someone. Also just easier to hold up, right? So if it's a really heavy weapon. And then additionally, if you're using a heavier, longer weapon, this may work better for you to come in, again, more with a gravity-driven strike. But if you try to do that same cut from a standard guard, and it's really, really long, really heavy, yes, it's probably going to be, so happen, but may not be as powerful or as fast as you might want it. So if you hold it this way and you still try to cut, it's not going to be that powerful, but it'll still get you there probably a little bit faster than you would if you had your sword all the way back here, just for you to throw it all the way back. Make sense? So what's the takeaway from this? The Federation generally trains you for the worst case scenario, right? So that's why we do 180 spins or 360 spins, as opposed to like in a normal sparring circumstance, I just probably turn like maybe this way, maybe like 135 or something like that. But we train for the worst case scenario so that when we need to dial it back, it's pretty easy, right? So we probably spent all that time right in number 2, right? So staying to 2, we have to do that giant jump, spin, cut. While in reality, if you just need to cut someone right here, I can either just like, right? I can just like turn, cut this way. I'll need to do a full 180. Likewise for this, right? So I might be holding up, kind of in an excessive position, but it's a lot easier to dial something back when you've trained harder, right? So here, as opposed to always doing this and then suddenly being given a really heavy weapon, and you're like, right? So if you're here and you've always been trained this and you're given a heavy weapon, you might be kind of like sagging a little bit. Versus if you're here, given a heavy weapon, it's like, oh, this is kind of what I've been training for, right? And you were given a lighter weapon, oh, I don't need to be this high up. I can just let it drop a little bit, right? And that will, of course, speed things up. So that's one thing, again, the Federation does consistently, right? So training you for the worst case scenario. And because, again, your body naturally dials it back. So drills. So the first drill I want you to try is go through those combinations from the last video using the Federation High Guard. Actually use both, right? So you get used to both of them because they both have very specific uses. But try it, right? So try using this into that one-handed strike, see if it works, right? Try from a standard one, strike, see if it works. But try both of those high guards and see, again, the benefits and the drawbacks of each of them. And similar to our introduction to high guard video, try just to see where you use the high guard, right? Because although you might be using a high guard in a form, it may not be the Federation high guard, right? So for instance, if we pause at that defense, we do tend to show off the Federation guard, right? So if I'm thinking about something like Bangkok, right? Where you do like the spin, right? Show off that guard, and maybe do no spin, because you can. That's gonna be different from, again, like in the beginning of Sangsu 1, where you're here, you're not this, right? You're getting ready to cut someone, and then you're drawing back defense. So the Federation secretly does a little bit of both, but again, just be aware of when you use each of them in the given form. And for funsies, switch it up, right? So when you normally do use a standard high guard, try the Federation. And when you normally do Federation, try the standard. And kind of switch between those and see if it like dramatically changes the way you do your form. By this point, you know the third one, try it with a heavy sword. Just at this point, invest into a heavy sword and try the high guard, and try holding the high guard this way, right? With a heavy sword, try holding the high guard this way with a heavy sword, and you're going to start to notice a difference between those two guards when you use something heavy. So a brief note, if you do see me use high guard, most likely I am going to be using the standard high guard and not necessarily the Federation high guard. That's just because I spar a lot from this position. That's my muscle memory. I will try to, when there's a Federation high guard, when I really need to show you, I'm going to try to do it. But just keep in mind in future videos, when you see me do a high guard, most likely it's going to be this standard as opposed to the lightning rod, right? But with that, make sure you keep training, right? Because you always want to improve, and stay humble. Haidong